Well, in the meantime, before we go straight to the conversation, let's take you through the stories that we have been monitoring for you in the course of the week. Now, last week we told you that the United States and Mozambique signed a new $500 million contract with the Millennium Challenge Corporation to develop infrastructure in the country's Zambezia province. We also detail you about the distrust expressed by Liberians over their forthcoming presidential election as contained in a poll. And finally, we told you that the new governor of Nigeria's central bank revealed plans to revamp the country's monetary policy. Well, that said, we'll go straight to the conversation for today. Once jolly good friends and political soulmates, former Vice President Atiku Abubakar and President Bola Tinubu are now in the middle of a legal battle. Now, both of them had contested for the ultimate seat of the president of Africa's most populous country in a fiercely contested election, which had a third force, Peter Obi, with the reasonable level of support, particularly by the younger population. Now, the election result was contested at a presidential election petition tribunal, which again affirmed President Tinubu as the winner of the polls, but the opposition isn't accepting defeat anytime soon. Now, Atiku Abubakar further approached the U.S. District Court in northern Illinois to compel the Chicago State University to release President Tinubu's academic records to support his argument that Tinubu forged a certificate he claimed to have obtained from CSU in 1979 and submitted to Nigeria's electoral body, the Independent National Electoral Commission, for the 2023 presidential election. Now, in a recent twist of the event, the Chicago State University said it does not have the certificate President Bola Tinubu presented to the Independent National Electoral Commission prior to the 2023 general election. The allegation of forgery was one of those dismissed by the Presidential Election Court in the suit Atiku filed to challenge the election of Tinubu. Earlier today, Atiku Abubakar held a press conference reacting to the current events. Let's take a look at it.
From exposing the Watergate scandal and unraveling the dubious certificates of politicians, journalists have maintained eternal vigilance by bridging the gap and stepping in when other arms of government failed. It is for these reasons that commendation must be given to David Hundeyin, an independent journalist whose extraordinary work and those of many more young people like him has become a source of inspiration. Special thanks must be given to the millions of Nigerian youths and citizen journalists too, who continue to put out the truth online even when no one is listening. Indeed, the price of liberty is eternal vigilance. They have put the country first in their firm commitment to unravel the truth and hold leaders accountable. This gives me the hope that we have worthy partners in the struggle to reclaim the country we call our home. This quest is not for or about Atiku Abubakar. It is a quest for the enthronement of truth, morality, justice, and accountability in our public affairs. In line with this, let me call on all well-meaning Nigerians, leaders of thought, our religious leaders, our traditional leaders, our community leaders, our political leaders, and in particular, Governor Peter Obi of the Labour Party and Governor Rabi Ukwankwaso of the NNPP and the leaders of every political party in Nigeria, and indeed every single person who loves this country, as I do, and who wishes nothing but the best for this country as I do, to join me in this campaign to enshrine probity, accountability, and the basic principles of justice, morality, and uprightness in our country and in our government.
Quite interesting one there. Well, before I even, say anything about this, let's bring in our own in-house, one of our in-house correspondents, Dapo Adegboyega. Dapo was on the news when this broke, and he was one of the first to push this out through News Central Studios. Dapo, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Bernard, and blessings.
Welcome.
All right, Dapo, very quickly. Atiku Abubakar and Bola Ahmed Tinubu, two jolly good friends, as Blessings read earlier. But is this a case of, like they say, the American principles, no permanent friend, no permanent enemy, just permanent interest? Because at some point it seemed like Atiku was going silent, was just, backing out and letting everything slide.
Accepting his
but,
fate.
exactly, accepting things the way they were. But now there's some more spring in his step, so to speak, some more wind to his wings, if we put it that way.
Well, interesting times, you say, in Nigeria's political history, or political, what I call a process right now. I mean, the beauty of democracy is the ability to have, opposing views. We might be friends, but it doesn't mean we need to all agree on almost everything. Now, I mean, while the conference was on, Atiku, during the question and answers session, Atiku actually fielded some questions, and part of what was asked was someone raised an issue of betrayal, saying that it looks like you are betraying a one-time friend of yours. And he said no. And Atiku went as far as, going down memory lane, saying he remembers the time when there was a particular election. I can't really remember the date right now. Tinubu wanted to be his vice. That's the current president right now. And in his words, he said that he asked, would you allow for a Muslim ticket? And the people that brought in that suggestion kept quiet. And it was like, well, he would not stand for that, that Nigeria is multifaceted and the government should reflect as such. And to some extent, that sort of, I don't want to use the word ended, but it's sort of leveled, simmered down on their political relationship. Now, that said, I think it's beyond personal relationship. Yeah, it's a question of what is good and what is not, what is morally questionable and what is, of course, morally acceptable and also constitutionally too. Now, does the Constitution say something about qualification when running for office? Yes, even though it's in various degrees. Does the Constitution emphasize the need of, you presenting authentic documents? Of course, we know that forgery, impersonation is a major offense. And I think that is what all of this process is about. Yes, we know that this issue was brought before the tribunal and the tribunal kicked it out. But the opposition, or of course the People's Democratic Party and Atiku, decided to take a step further to verify certain issues. Now, according to them, they said that number one, there's the issue of forgery. There's also inconsistency in as regards gender, as regards identity. And then they even said in one of the documents presented, a particular name, Adekunle, was there, right? So, I mean, when you look at all of this, you would also want to, you would expect some sort of clarifications as to all of this issue. I think it's almost, will I use the word a no-brainer? If you're applying for a job, for instance, right? It's just normal for them to go through your documents and go and try to verify. I think it also opens up a lot of things too, particularly when it comes to the aspect of due diligence on the part of agencies. Are we saying that INEC did not conduct due diligence when it received some of these documents? Are we saying the judiciary did not conduct any form of due diligence before it made certain pronouncements? So, I mean, when you look at all of these factors, I think from a broader perspective, right, without being partisan or anything, you just want to have clarification and clarity on some of these issues.
All right, Dapo, speaking of forgery of certificates and all of that, now, we do understand from what Atiku said that an independent journalist, Hondain, helped dig out some of these things, but can we ascertain the veracity of these claims, or are they just, hearsays for now?
Okay, so according to Atiku and his team, they said that they actually wrote to the university and they were able to get the register. That's West, I'm trying to remember the name of the registrar right now, who actually gave an oral, what I call it, testimony right now, saying that, yes, when it comes to some of the diplomas they have, is the ones that have not been collected, and a particular one that relates to the president isn't with them, and all of that. And then when they did their due diligence and findings, they saw some inconsistencies, right? That are bordering around gender, bordering around identity, bordering around certain names that popped up, and asking questions as to the veracity of these documents. I think as much as one would want to ask, why go through all of this trouble? It's also important to know exactly the true identity of who you're dealing with, right? I think it's important. It's just a common sense, right? Yeah. Are you who you say or you claim to be, right? So, I mean, if that is clear, then there's no issue. Atiku went as far as saying that, look, if the Supreme Court says that, look, there's no case with this, it will back out. But if it says there's a case here, they will keep pushing. Okay. So I just think clarity is what is needed here.
All right, that was is a good point. It's a good thing you said the Supreme Court. If the Supreme Court says you are who you are, then he would back out. And if he says otherwise, then he'll continue. Because my next question, but that will be after this break, my next question is going to be, how well can we now trust the judiciary, being the fact that the judiciary had thrown out these cases, the first time? But we'll talk about this when we come back
just
from...
go ahead and answer.
Okay, let's go ahead with it then. So,
okay.
Of course, let me take us back to the Presidential Petition Tribunal, where the cases were thrown out. And now we're seeing that more evidence has been brought forward by David Hunde, who, by the way, former Vice President Atiku Abubakar gave some, should I say, accolades. And people were saying this is the time for journalists and reporters to stand tall and proud. But that's a topic for another day. So, again, Dapo, now what then happens to the judiciary, in this case, after they have thrown out the case first, and now we're seeing more evidence?
Okay, just to take our mind back, this is not the first time the academic credentials of the president has actually been brought to the fore when it comes to, contestation as to the veracity of the documents. We know that during the time of the late Gani Fawemi, when he was still the governor of Lagos, that's Bola Ahmed Tinubu, Gani Fawemi also raised that issue. We also know that some candidates too, vying for the top job in Lagos State also raised the issue. So this is not the first time the current president of Nigeria, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, has had a back and forth concerning his academic history. Now, that said, in terms of the judiciary in Nigeria, I think that is another ball game. People are beginning to question right now the integrity of that institution itself, right? I mean, today we see judgments and counter judgments, and you see some set of people with vested interest get an injunction from a court somewhere far north. Some other people will go to the south, and then you see a lot of, back and forth. And then you ask yourself, where is the seamless process within the judiciary? Where's the integrity in all of the process, right? I don't want to, go into, excessive detail, but I think for now, the judiciary in Nigeria has a lot to do when it comes to boosting confidence, of the people. We've seen people who thought, they could get justice, and it turned the other way. And we've seen a situation whereby it appears like, are you trying to twist the arm of justice to favor certain people? Even though we've seen cases, or some cases, where at the end of the day, justice is served. So I think the judiciary for now has a lot to do when it comes to winning the trust of the people, particularly with current realities, because this is a very sensitive matter.
Right. Well, here's what I'll say to that, and that's me playing the devil's advocate. The judiciary majors their actions on fact, right? And this is something we've known for a long time. Every country does it. Every courthouse does it. That their jurisdiction is just based on fact. So I wouldn't say that they saw these things happening and still threw the case out. It's about how much or how well you can prove that what you're saying is actually true. So a lot of times they'll tell you, okay, fine, you say he did this, you say he did that. Can you prove it? But I think what's more concerning at this point is, if at all this case holds water in court, what then happens?
Exactly. That's actually, it's the $1 million question.
But just to answer your question, Blessings, fact again is relative, right? yeah, you might want to say, okay, what you present in court, if it's a grandstanding enough. But we've seen cases where there are some issues where it's beyond the law, and then it falls solely at the discretion of the presiding judge or the judges to actually prevail, maybe based on subsequent or previous similar scenarios of that kind. Now, these 2023 elections have actually brought to the fore, let me use the word, has created some sort of new trajectory, for subsequent elections, and we hope that we are able to learn from it. But that said, the bigger picture is this. I think what Nigerians will want is a situation whereby when elections are organized by the umpire, right, the process is seamless and transparent enough such that we don't need to wait for a judge or some judges to decide the eventual winner.
Sadly, it looks like that has come to stay at the moment, because almost every election now is contested.
So why at the end of the day spend billions of naira in conducting elections, taxpayers' money? Why do you have people line up in the sun under the rain saying they are voting for candidates when at the end of the day a judge or some judges would upturn whatever decision is made, and at the end of the day give it based on whatever is presented before them? So I think this legal crossfire, Nigeria really needs to find a way to sort of nip it in the bud. And it's really easy. Make the process transparent. One of the issues that caused a lot of, will I call it back and forth, is the electronic transmission of results. INEC assured Nigerians then that it was going to be seamless. They were prepared. They were not going to shift the date. Everything will be in real time. But we saw what happened on the field. And then eventually, when the tribunal declared, they said INEC is at the prerogative to transmit the results through whatever means, which originally contradicts the confidence the umpire, gave the people. Yeah. So I think in the long run, the big question or the elephant in the room is, how do we ensure that when we conduct elections, at the level of the umpire, talking about INEC, the electoral process, we don't need to wait to take it to a tribunal, right, for a judge or a group of judges to decide eventually who the winner is. I think it just speaks a lot about the electoral process, honestly. And it also, in a way, contradicts the will of the people too. So it's the will of the people versus the decision of a few judges or a judge.
Very quickly, Dapo, as we wrap this up, and again, as I said very quickly, the backlash of all of this now falls, like you said, on the electoral umpire, because we've seen court cases from one state to another and then to the federal level. Does this now mean that INEC, being the electoral umpire, with all the time that they had and all the monies that was budgeted for election preparation, did not do their due diligence, did not do their homework well, and did not get it right? So eventually at the end, INEC was given pass mark by several bodies, but does this now show that those marks were wrong? And
sorry, let me just add a question to that, because a lot of people, when the INEC chairman made a statement, when this whole thing was being debated, he said something that if you're not comfortable with it, go to court. And then that made a lot of people start speculating that. Doesn't mean that they have the judiciary in their pocket, like we just wiggle our way out of this and then the courts will rule in our favor.
As a matter of fact, before you come in, this a bit made me laugh, because after he said go to court, of course, we know that go to court phrase became very popular. I read an African proverb somewhere that said, where a man urges you to take your case to court, you should be sure that his brother is one of the lawyers or one of the judges. And that made me laugh anyway. But just like what Blessings is saying, it questions a lot of things. Doesn't mean that INEC has the court. Just so many questions.
Well, I think he just made that statement based on what due process is about. Okay, you don't like the verdict or the results you generated, you can actually take your case, to court. But again, I think why you have this level of confidence is because we have not seen some level of accountability on the part of the institution itself. So you conduct an election and there are some shortfalls or shortcomings and nobody's asking questions. Nobody's saying, come and tell us how this money is spent, right? Why is it that at so time, the beavers was down, the Saba was down, yet you requested a budget of so billions of naira? Nobody is asking questions, right? So when there's no penalty, there's no punishment, right? It's business as usual. So I think that, leadership is about intentionality. If you want a society to work, prosper, and be progressive. You need to be intentional about it. Things don't just move. People make it happen, right? So until we have a situation of checks and balances. So you've conducted an elections, a lot of shortcomings. Why? Nobody's asking questions until that is sorted. Then you continue to have these go-to-court issues. Then aside that also, the process needs to be seamless and transparent. Look, Bernard, right now I remember growing up, I may not be one of the Gen Zs, but we are in between. But we are in between. We started then. I remember when my parents used to take me to the bank to queue up just to pay school fees.
Oh yeah.
And then they will give you a draft.
I fell in that category.
Thank you. They will give you a draft.
Not in my head, but I didn't.
If you misplace that document, you are in trouble. There's no evidence, right? And then I remember when the banking system morphed to the level of using ATM. I still remember my first ATM experience. When they gave me the card, I said, what do I do with this card? They said, I'll put it in the machine. And the thing gave me money. It was program. It was like magic. And then the first time they said, you can get debit alert. Someone sends you money electronically. Until I saw it happen in real time. What am I saying? Those people in that sector were intentional to make it work. If INEC is intentional to make the electoral process seamless and digital, it will work.
And I think it also boils down to accountability, because it feels like people are doing whatever they want to do and getting away with it. And that's why INEC might decide now, I'm not saying that they did that intentionally, but maybe not check their actions enough because they know that nobody's checking it for them, nobody's holding them accountable. So I think accountability is something that would also should uphold in this country. But anyways, thank you so much, Dapo Adegboyega, our correspondent at News Central Television, for joining us to discuss this. We appreciate your time with us.
Thank you for having me, as always.